Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Civic Works Committee. I'm going to start out by looking for any disclosures of pecuniary interest. Seeing none, is there anyone who wants to pull a consent item? 2.1. Okay, 2.1 to be pulled. Okay, we'll put the remaining consent items up. Do you want an item pulled or just to speak to it?
No, I just want to ask a question or make a statement on two of them.
Okay, we'll do that in the group.
I don't want to pull it just for that.
Perfect, we'll do that in the group. So we're going to put all of the consent items except for 2.1 up. And I will go to Councillor Usher first.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Throughout all of these projects, one of the things that has been mentioned a lot is to do with respect to traffic diversion. And I think that that's one of the things that during this summer, we get a lot of complaints about, concerns expressed and so on. We don't bring them to staff because we know what the situation is. And sometimes people are not complaining, they're just asking us to do better. I noticed that in here, we talk a lot about that. And it seems to me that we are making a desperate effort to alleviate that. So I just wanted all of us to recognize the fact that we do get these concerns, and obviously you get the concerns too because you mentioned them here. But I just wanted to express it that we also get the concern, and we are very grateful for what you're putting into these to help with that situation. It's not something that we could avoid completely unless we don't want to do any construction, and we understand that. So thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Usher. And Councillor Usher, are you willing to move those items, all the consents except for 2.1? The clerk reminds me we no longer do it on screen, so I do need a mover and a seconder so we can continue. Moved by Councillor Usher, seconded by Councillor Park, and I have Councillor Park next on the speakers list.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to speak briefly on 2.5. Very glad to see this project going forward. I know a lot of properties will be impacted positively by the changes, although with any sort of construction, there's negative impacts during the course of construction, but I'm very pleased by seeing the work that's been done to date, and I know that the communication will be right where it needs to be to make sure people know where they can go and where they can't go on a day-to-day basis. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Park. I have Councillor Hubert and then Van Holst.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I wanted to comment on 2.4 and 2.5 as well, just to say this is, outstanding step forward for our river, outstanding step forward for private property. It's remarkable how long some of those sewers have lasted. And to say that they don't owe us a nickel would be a bit of an understatement, frankly. Some of them going back into the 19th century. And so that's a very positive. I also want to recognize that staff have recognized the importance of the Juno and the Junos next year, and that the phasing is being done to coordinate and accommodate that very, very important event for the City of London. So I want to thank staff for that. And perhaps through you, Madam Chair, to our staff, what's the sum total of 2.5 and 2.6, both the York Street, 2.4 and 2.5, the Egerton and the King and the York Street projects?
Our staff are just going to do the math. I see some pencils sharpening back there and some numbers being run, and as soon as they have a total, we'll get that for you. Sorry, can you use your microphone to confirm?
Sorry, through the chair, approximately $13 million worth of capital investment.
So that's really important because a lot of people say, so where is our money going? What are we doing about the river? I hear it over and over and over again. There's $13 million of infrastructure investment that will have a direct impact on overflows in terms of the river and separation and capacity for our system. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Van Holst.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just had a question regarding number 2.8. I believe that the Rapid Transit Working Group was that not going to SPPC? So I think that's where those reports went previously. I may be wrong, but I just wanted to ask about that. I thought we had sent this there.
When council was first considering the rapid transit work, it did go to SPPC, so all of council could determine whether or not they wish to proceed with the project. But like the London plan, once we reach the operational stage, which we're at now, those reports go through Civic Works Committee, and the recent reports have gone there as well.
Okay, thank you.
Are any other speakers or comments on the consent items with the exception of 2.1? Councillor Helmer.
Thank you. On 2.2, I'm glad to see this particular report coming forward. I saw a good outline of what is being considered, which I think is the right direction to be going, and I'm glad that that's the way we're headed. I am wondering about timing. It says in the report sort of by the end of 2018, which is a pretty big range. I wonder if there's any more specific timeline we're aiming for.
Through the chair to the councillor, our intent is to come back either in September or October so that if there is any financial implications that could be taken into account as part of the next multi-year budget.
I'm seeing no other comments, so we can open that up for a vote and consideration. The clerk has votes for everyone with the exception of Councillor Squire and Councillor Usher, who have both indicated that they vote in the affirmative. So I think we can close that vote. Mayor Brown, is your vote a yes? Yay. Thank you, it is a yay. Apologies to anyone watching from home. We are still working with a new system, and so we're working through those pieces as patiently as possible.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 6-0.
Thank you. I'll go to Councillor Squire for item 2.1, which he pulled.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and through you. First of all, congratulations on all of this work. These are great projects. A lot of them long overdue from some people's point of view, but I appreciate the work that's being done, particularly the connectivity of Cheapside is very important to connect it so that it's going to come down from the Thames Valley Parkway right out, hopefully to Fanshawe Park Road or Fanshawe College at some point in time. So that's really great news. My question is, one of the things that people are constantly asking me about is what standards are you using for bike lanes? In other words, I appreciate that we can't build them off the roadway. Sometimes we don't have sufficient width. But on some bikeways, at least one in the city on the Quebec Street overpass, there were dividers put up, and I'm sorry, I can't remember the technical name, but they're little pieces of iron that separate the bike lane from the actual traffic. And I haven't seen them in too many areas of the city. So I just want to know, can we do that in some of these bikeways? Will we do it? And how do we make that determination? Because certainly some bike enthusiasts have raised that issue with me, that we're not creating any separation between the bike lane and regular traffic.
Mr. Soto?
Thank you through the chair to the councillor. The City of London follows the Ontario Traffic Manual, It is a set of guidelines from everything from how you design the roadway to traffic signals to the design of cycling facilities. Those guidelines are based on best practice, not only across Ontario, but also across Canada. Those guidelines are currently being updated. There are different standards out there, and I believe there's a number of community advocates that are proposing that we use American standards. They are slightly different. In general, they are very similar, but they're all based on a system where, depending on the type of facility, is really dependent on volume and speed of the roadway itself. So what you're seeing more and more across Canada is more delineated, separated bikeways. That is something that we're constantly looking at. Again, those guidelines provide you with some general layouts of how they should work. What I think you'll see as we move forward, we'll see more of those delineated cycle paths. You'll see more of the cycling facilities in the boulevard that provides for that separation and provides for greater comfort. All of that, though, has to be taken into account with the cross-section of the roadway itself. So in a lot of areas, it's about trade-offs. And it's about, do you provide for parking? Do you provide for the travel lanes? Do you provide for sidewalks and pedestrians? And do you have room for cycling? So where we have the room, we provide the highest and best standard of cycling lanes, facilities that we can. In other areas, we go back to what the manual itself calls for. So it's not a one-size-fits-all. Not every roadway has to have delineated, separated bike lanes. That's not really how it works. It's about volumes and the speed of the roadway itself. So we can definitely provide more information, but our cycling master plan provides great information on our approach and the types of facilities that we'll be looking at implementing on various roadways.
Just to follow up, just so I'm clear, when you said, you've said several times more delineated, and I just want to understand what more delineated mean. Does that mean that there was different color? Because a lot of people say, well, just painting a bike lane green isn't really adequate delineation. When you say that, do you mean we're going to see more actual posts? That's what I call them, that's what they look like, between the road, or what can people expect to see?
So the range could be, of cycling facilities could be anything from shared use in a roadway if the volumes are low and the speeds are low, to a simple painted line, depending on the volume, as I indicated, to the point where you might have bollards, delineators that separate the traffic, where you might actually have some space. And then you can actually look at putting those cycling facilities in the boulevard itself. So it all varies. The greater separation you provide, obviously the safer it is. But that is a function of the speed and class and volume on the roadway itself.
Are there any other comments on 2.1? If not, I do need a mover and a seconder. Moved by Councillor Park, seconded by Mayor Brown. And we'll get that up on the screen. Sorry, I think that was Councillor Usher for the second.
Currently, I don't have voting rights, so I'll vote manually, yay.
I'll vote manually, yeah.
Thank you. Mayor Brown and Councillor Squire are both voting manually affirmative.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 6-0.
Thank you. That resolves our consent items for today. Next, we have 3.1, and we are on time to do that. I will look to Mr. Soldo first for some opening comments.
Thank you, through the chair, to the committee. We have here today the Ministry of Transportation and their consultant, Dillon Consulting, to provide us with an overview of this environmental assessment. has been an ongoing environmental assessment, and it does include some municipal roadways itself. So here today we have Frank Hosch-Timbach from the MTO and Jeff Matthews. They'll be providing the presentation.
Thank you, welcome. I hope somebody walked you through how to use the system first. If not, let me know.
Again, thank you for the opportunity provided us to allow us to provide you with an overview and update on the Highway 401 Colonel Talbot Road Interchange and Glamorth Drive Underpass Project. It's a preliminary design and EA project. And the last time we were here was back in May of 2015 presenting about this project. Again, my name is Jeff Matthews with Dillon Consulting, and with me is Frank Hoschenbach, who is the MTO project manager for this project. The original study for this area received EA clearance back in 2004. In 2012, the ministry retained Dillon to complete the study, to review and update the approved plan for this area, since significant time had passed since the 2004 study. The things we're looking for is changes to the local road networks. Traffic patterns have changed. The new Wonderland Road interchange is now built and operational. MTO access management guidelines have been published. Green Lane has expanded. Ford Talbotville is not there any longer. Continued deterioration of both bridges have put them to really at the end of their lifespan. We were to consider alternatives to improve the function and operation of Colonel Talbot Road and update the existing conditions within the study area. In all of that, we will document the changes to the approved plan in the addendum to the 2004 TESR. For context, orientation, this project is located in the southwest corner of the city. This project is following the Class CA process for provincial highways. It's a Class B project. And as we're nearing the end of the study, we will have a notice of study completion out soon, as well as transportation environmental study addendum published on the public record. Our timelines. The work on this commenced way back in November 2012. We had a notice of study commencement out published in February 2013. We've had 3 public open houses, the last one most recently in February 1st of this year. We've had numerous consultation events, including stakeholder meetings with the local businesses, agricultural groups, and this project was paused for a little bit of time shortly after we were here last. So since the last time we were here, May 2015, we've completed additional field studies, additional traffic counts, traffic simulations, more consultation with interested stakeholders, community groups, and agencies. We've reviewed and updated the alternatives, and we've also gone back to the comparative evaluation tables. And with that, we have identified a new technically preferred alternative, which was presented at the 3rd PIC February 1st. So consultation to date, obviously the 3 public information centers I've mentioned, separate meetings with a lot of groups, stakeholder groups, agencies, including the City of London, with well over 500 comments and submissions received on this project to date. We've heard, we've listened, we've adapted. We've listened to the stakeholders. Their general concerns include there's a significant agricultural operation in this area, concern with speed differential between the traffic and the equipment, desire for no cul-de-sacs on Temple Road. The new interchange should accommodate movement of agricultural equipment in all directions, do not restrict expansion of businesses, and minimize noise. This figure is from the 2004 approved plan. It includes a new bridge at both Colonel Talbot and Glanworth, and basically the same locations as they exist now. New interchange ramps with the east, north, south ramp aligned to Littlewin. Glanworth Drive is aligned farther north to the interchange. So that was the base point for starting. In June 2013, we held at the first PIC and we presented 3 alternatives. Alternative 1 is really the 2004 plan updated to current standards. We moved Highway 4 Bridge offline so it could be constructed independently and allow Highway 4 to remain in operation. and also avoid some impacts to the Best Western property. The new structure will be 25.8 meters of pavement width compared to existing has 17 meters. The grades are very similar. Temple Road in this case is cul-de-sac to the east, and traffic signals will be provided at the two ramp terminals. Alternative 2 was a previously technically preferred alternative. Was a without Glanworth structure option, and that tempo connecting Glanworth to Highway 4 or Colonel Talbot. And alternative 3, very similar to alternative 2, but had Littlewood connected farther north of the interchange. Following that PIC 1, we met with the stakeholder group, focused on the agricultural community needs. They came forward with an alternative. We turned it in putting engineering criteria to it. We turned it into alternative 4. However, there were some negative impacts to this when it did impact the Gentech property for expansion purposes. So following PIC 2, again, meeting with the stakeholder groups, having a working session to explore concerns, we developed alternatives 5 and 6. Alternative 5, very similar to alternative 4, moving east, north, south ramp exit much farther east on 401 and connecting to Colonel Talbot much farther north. This did provide, introduce conflicts with both the new Wonderland Road interchange ramps, as well as putting a greater area within the control of the ministry's access control guidelines. Alternative 6, this does include a Glanworth structure. However, in this alternative, the structure is turned closer to a 90 degrees to 401 and shifted much farther to the east. Tempo remains in place and connects Glanworth to Colonel Talbot. And Littlewood is lined farther to the north to meet up with Glanworth. This alternative does require more agricultural lands. However, it does provide the east-west link that the local stakeholders are wanting. And again, traffic signals will be provided at the ramp terminals. Based on the feedback we received and the new studies undertook over the last while, we went back to that comparative evaluation table to ensure we had accounted for what we had heard and what we had found. For the transportation engineering factors, alternative 6 was preferred. Best met the ministry guidelines, maintain local road network, provide that reliable and safe route for all users. For the natural environment factors, alternative 2 and 3 are preferred. They have the least potential to negatively impact the natural environment. On social economic factors, alternative 2 is preferred. Fewest impacts to existing and future land uses and best conforms to planning policies. And under cultural environment factors, alternative 1, 4, and 5 are preferred. Again, the least impact. What we have concluded, though, that alternative 6 is the technically preferred alternative over alternative 2, the previous technically preferred alternative. Alternative 6 adheres to the engineering standards, policies, and practices of the ministry, best maintains the local road network, offers potential benefits for future development opportunities, provides an efficient route for the movement of all traffic, including agricultural equipment, and addresses the concerns of the stakeholder group we have heard through the public consultation process. So to recap, our technically preferred alternative is a new interchange, including new ramps and bridge for Colonel Talbot, a new Glanworth structure to the east of the existing bridge, temple connected to Glanworth, connecting Glanworth to Colonel Talbot, Littlewood aligned to the north, opposite of Glanworth, traffic signals at the ramp terminals, and stop control at all other intersections. The Glanworth Drive structure will be 12 meters of traveled way compared to 8.5 meters of width on the existing structure. And of note, that is 2 meters wider than the Ontario standards require. So next steps, project team will be finalizing the Class EA over the next few weeks. We will be putting this on the public record. And as norm, the public will have an opportunity to file disagreement with our findings and request a Part 2 order. The design report will be created following that. And this project currently sits on the Southern Highways Program for completion beyond 2021. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll go to the committee to look for any questions on the plan. If you do look at page 74, the motion in front of us today is to endorse the technically preferred alternates. So with that in mind, we'll start with Councillor Usher, and then I'll go to Councillor.
Are you just asking for questions at this point?
Yeah, questions or comments?
Okay. No, I just want to make a comment, so I'll make it afterwards. Thank you.
Okay, questions, Councillor Park? Comment, Councillor Hubert? Questions or comment? Okay, go ahead.
So it's a little tough because there's so many different criteria that are being used, and to flip between the pages, and needless to say, the black and white that we get isn't as easily handled. But when I ran to your summary around the comparative evaluation, I wasn't sure how we ended up on alternative 6, to be honest with you, because, well, unless it's that transportation engineering trumps everything, but the natural says alternative 2 or 3 is preferred, socioeconomic says alternative 2, and a cultural says 1, 4, or 5 are preferred, but we end up with number 6 because it's transportation and engineering. So can you help me understand how we end up with that, given that the 3 of the 4 categories say something totally different than that? Or was and it may be back further, did the weighting on the engineering and transportation sort of have a 90% weighting on that, or how did you figure that out?
Thank you for the question. It's an excellent question. So what you see here is 4 boxes that summarize many, many pages of comparative evaluation, and it's very hard to get the message across in a concise manner in this way. When we did go back and look at all those criteria, and yes, as you're correct to point out, alternative 2 does show up in some of those other criteria, and it was a previously approved plan. But we heard strongly from the public. We went back and looked at kind of the needs of the local area, the needs of the agricultural groups as well, and yes, and you correctly mentioned too, the engineering standards are very important. So taking a look at that, taking a really holistic look at this project, 2 and 6 were very, very close, but you have to tip it to 6 in this case because of the strong community needs.
Okay, so let me go down the road a little bit further in terms of social economic impacts. So number 6, how do the socioeconomic impacts differ from alternative 2, if you could?
That could be something we're going to have to get back to, and we do not have the full, I don't want to, without the full many pages of comparative evaluation, on that one may have to come back to them.
Okay, let me ask another question. Can you help me understand, 5 years since you had 2 picks in 2013, and then you had another one this year. I wasn't at any of them. I'd be very interested in knowing how the concerns of the public, although you've blended the comments kind of between them 500 over how the comments differ between, what has changed in the public's perception in the 5 years, if you could.
Thank you very much for the question. I'm Frank Hoschenbach from the MTO. In 2013, through the chair to the councillor, in 2013, the comments we received strongly indicated that alternative 2 was not going to work for the greater agricultural community because that alternative didn't include the Glenworth Drive Bridge. There were other issues that they had concerns with, but the big one was that we were not going to be replacing that bridge. In the meantime, between 2013 and 2018, we went back, did more research, talked to everybody we could, both at the provincial level, municipal level, the community. And we went back and redid our evaluation. And based on that evaluation, we came up with alternative 6 as the technically preferred alternative, which did include a new Glenworth Drive bridge. And the feedback that we received at PIC number 3 on February 1st was much more positive, that they said we got it right this time. And they were very approving that we were going to be putting back the Glenworth Drive bridge.
Okay, thank you, I appreciate it.
Thanks. I have Mayor Brown for questions.
All of my questions were answered, so I'll save my comments as compliments for the next stage.
Councillor Van Hulst, questions?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So my question through you to our guests, looking at alternative 6, I can see why the stakeholders would want that connection. It looks like we're driving diagonally through one farm and a portion of another farm. But I'm also wondering, in the change, are we able to recover some farmland from the roads that aren't going to be used in the future? It looks like what we had previously. There's some agricultural space that might be able to be reclaimed. Is that the case?
Through the chair, yes, we are cutting a couple of farms in half. And in order to get the property we need, we will be negotiating with the property owners and taking into account the piece of property that could be cut off from their use. But then once we're done, we'll also look at opportunities where available to divest ourselves of those properties and hopefully it'll be turned back into farmland for somebody who can access it.
That's actually referring to some of the previous roads. As I look on the map, you can see in the light portions, there's, in alternative 6, there's be places where roads are no longer there. Will those be reclaimed?
We'll have to look into that further once we're done the project. We like to hold on to land that we feel we may need in the future. The last thing we want to do is sell land and then have to buy it back. And so what of the land that we currently have we can dispose of still needs to be discussed.
All right, Councillor Usher and then Park for comments.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First of all, I'm going to ask a question because Councillor Hubert asked a question, and I'm not so sure he got the answer, and that was the difference between alternative 2 and 6. And I wasn't sure if we got an answer. It seems to me that the biggest alternative is really the Glenworth Drive incorporation into 6, which is not in 2. Is that true, you, Madam Chair? I just want to make sure that that's what Councillor Hubert was asking. Yeah, okay, good. Madam Chair, I've been on this project since King Hatchet was a hammer. And that means a long time. It's not in my ward, but it does affect a lot of the people in my ward, who live in my ward, the farmers, the agricultural people, and some of the industrial people who have to use that route, particularly Glenworth Drive. And the removal or the elimination, whatever you want to call it, of Glenworth Drive, to me was the biggest sticking point. And they've come to us over and over as a council. They went to MTO, they went to staff, we had meetings in the mayor's office several times, and Mr. Sodko, Mr. Solda have been talking about this and explaining things to us throughout, and MTO. They've never hidden or tried to keep themselves away from this. So I guess to keep my comments short, I just want to thank all of the people who worked on this. I haven't spoken to the residents as yet with respect to this specific item, but from past experience and past discussions with them, I believe that they will be pleased because their biggest sticking point from that perspective was Glenworth Drive. And having that to be able to utilize it is very, very important for them and the equipment and machinery that they use, because they really don't want to go any other route but Glenwood Drive, and I could see why. So I want to thank staff for sticking with this. I want to thank the MTO for providing all these alternatives, and all of those people who have been involved. On behalf of my colleague, Councillor Hopkins, whose ward this is in mostly, and I think hopefully that the community will be able to accept this. Based on what I've read in here, on all the different comments, I think there are about 500 different comments. We can't go through all of them. I'm very pleased with what I see here. So I'm going to hope you give me the opportunity to move this motion.
Thank you. We will put you down as the mover, and we'll look for a seconder. Council Park has stated that she no longer needs to ask questions and make comments, so we'll go to Mayor Brown.
Thank you very much, Chair. I want to spend a little bit of time on this because it really was a contentious issue within the community, and it's landing in the right place. As Councillor Usher has pointed out, he's been working on this since probably 2003, and so thank you for your work on that. I know that when this was brought to my attention and the current ward councillor's attention, Councillor Hopkins, the community felt cynical and they felt like it was a done deal. And we see that oftentimes in the work that we do. For, I think, genuine concerns. There were agricultural interests that were at play. Some were connected to safety, some were connected to business operation and efficiency. And then when some of the changes were contemplated, then there were business concerns for local area businesses that are significant employers in the area. The stress levels were high. I can certainly attest to that, and the conversations that we were having at the time were really respectful, but they were intense, and it was all about community advocacy. And I think that this is an example of showing how this process works. There was significant consultation. There were a series of options that were put on the table. Modifications were made, and we end up with a better overall solution to the problem. And so I would like to echo the compliments that Councillor Usher has delivered today. I'd be happy to second the motion. I think that this is a very good example of how competing interests sometimes can come together with, what's important from an engineering perspective, and we can find the very best possible solution. So thank you for your work on this.
Thank you for your comments, Mayor Brown. We would love to have you second the motion. However, our system limitations are such today that's not possible to have you second the motion. So I will look for a seconder. Seconded by Deputy Mayor Hubert, and then I have Councillor Squire on the list, and then Councillor Helmer.
Yes, through you, Madam Chair. I appreciate the work that's been done on the interchanges, but like most people in London, our key concern with an overpass or whatever is how do we get there? How easily can we get there? So I really appreciate the work we're doing on Western Road and Warncliffe, that people will be able to get out to Lambeth quicker and on the overpass there. But help me out with this one. What are we doing in the city to make it more connected to it so that it's easier to access, or are we? That's what I'm curious about.
Through the chair to the councillor, if I understand your question correctly, what are we doing on Colonel Talbot and Wonderland Road? Okay, in terms of Wonderland Road, right now, I believe there is a construction being undertaken this year between the 402 and the 401, which is going to be reconstructing that section of roadway to an upgraded section of 2-lane roadway. There is it also is preparing that platform in the future for a potential 4-lane widening. Further south from the 401, currently that roadway is being upgraded as well. There was a section that was done from the city limits to just short of Glanworth last year, and then from Glanworth North, that's being reconstructed as well. So our rural roadways are very important parts of our overall municipal system. This alternative here is really important in terms of providing that integrity or maintaining the integrity of the overall local system in that area. If Glanworth wasn't there, that potentially could be a missing chunk from our overall local system. So Colonel Talbot itself, we did some resurfacing just short of this study area a couple of years ago, so that entire section was completed. South of this interchange, it actually is an MTO highway, so north of there is what we've been working on as the city. This summer, there will be work done in Lambeth as well to upgrade the road system in that area. So it is all part of an integrated approach that we have for improving transportation, not only in the urban area, but also in the rural area. That really came out through our last transportation master plan.
And I think my point is that the city works well on integrating the structures that the province is funding to make sure they're accessible to Londoners. I remember a time, others may not, when there was only one access or two accesses to the 401. You had to go up Wellington Road or you had to go up Warncliffe and connect out there. So these are huge improvements and they really connect London to the areas that it needs to be connected to. So I'm glad our staff is looking at that and integrating everything. It's very helpful.
Thank you. Councillor Helmer?
I can see why you're recommending 6. It's a little bit vague in the report that we have. I see the comments about the overall project budget not needing to change, which is good. This looks more expensive. So how much more expensive is it to put the bridge in and to build the extra roads? It's quite a lot of extra work.
Yes, it is more expensive because we do have more road to build and an extra bridge. The price wasn't a factor in the evaluation, and honestly, I don't know what the current price is. But we didn't want the entire evaluation to be down to which is cheaper. And so for the evaluation, we didn't even consider what the price was. It was considered indirectly, yes, there will be another bridge that we have to maintain, that kind of thing, but we weren't looking at the prices at that point.
And just to confirm, the overall budget, it looked like it was around 115 million for all the various interchange works. That's not going to be changing, even with this alternative 6?
Through the chair to the councillor, the agreement that the city has with the Ministry of Transportation is for a set value of 115 million. It does have a clause in there that allows the overall agreement to be changed depending on either a reduction or an increase, but to a maximum of $2 million to the city. So in terms of the overall projects, right now they are trending lower. So our anticipation is that it will be at 115 or less.
That's great to hear that the projects already done are coming in under. That's great. Thank you.
Are there any other comments or questions? Councillor Usher.
I just want to mention one other little thing that I missed, because the MPPs from way back when Chris Bentley was here in NPP UREC, they were all involved with this also, and they all had their input and their persuasion right along the way. So I didn't want to leave them out because they played an important part in all this. Madam Chair, while I have this opportunity, I'd like to ask a quick question just based on what Councillor Helmer just asked. This project is part of, I'm going to ask our staff, and then he could refer it. This project is part of 4 locations along the 401. And is the total thing that's $150 million? And how much the city is contributing to all of this? I think that somewhere I read that we're contributing $25 million. Do you have that in your head that you could offer me?
Thank you to the chair, to the councillor. The overall agreement is for 115 million. The city's portion of that is for 25 million.
You did say the overall, in other words, all 4?
That's correct. There was 4 interchanges. There was the Veterans Memorial Parkway, the Highbury interchange, Wonderland, and this interchange here at Colonel Talbot.
Okay, I think we can open the vote. We've had a mover and a seconder, and so that will be up on screen. If for any reason you can't vote on screen, let me know and we will get your manual vote. Mayor Brown?
Yay.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Thank you. Moving along to 3.2, can I get an introduction on that one as well?
Thank you to the chair, to the committee. The report that we have before you here today refers to our new London infrastructure construction program. And the purpose of this report really was to provide you with an overview of what occurred in terms of our projects in 2017, similar to what we've done in the past, provide you with an overview of the projects we're going to be doing in 2018, and then most importantly, how we're going to be managing those projects within the community. This year in particular in the downtown, on our agenda today, we approved the York Street sewer separation, and in the previous Civic Works Committee, we approved Dundas Place, and we also heard about the Junos already today. So a really important component of this is how we're going to be dealing with the communications and coordination of construction projects in the downtown. So today we have a short presentation that's actually going to focus on the last aspect, which is the communications and management. And we have two individuals. We have Ms. Hutchison, who is a communications specialist in our comms department, and Mr. Yanchula, who, for those of you that do not know, he has a new title these days. He's now the manager of downtown projects and business relations, and he is working within the engineering and environmental services department for the next couple of years, helping manage these projects. So I'm going to turn this over to Mr. Yanchula and Ms. Hutchison.
Thank you. As Edward said, these are interesting times for infrastructure construction in the core. I will be working for the next up to 2 years with Megan Hutchinson, who has been introduced, and Ugo Di Candido, who is not here today, and his team, including Brian Nourse and others. So I'm going to be getting much more friendly with the engineers than I ever have been. This is all based on the work that we did in our downtown plan, which is named Our Move Forward. We have really about a decade's worth of infrastructure connections that have to happen in the core area, and we're starting them this year. So the dots that you see on the screen there are the ones for 2018. In the center row of dots there is on Dundas Place. That's the phase 1 of Dundas Place project. We have the York Street sewer separation project, phase 1, which is going from the Thames River as far eastbound as you see it there on Talbot, and also north on Talbot Street, you'll see some reconstruction that will also be happening. So this is just a snapshot of how things are happening in the core, and they're going to be happening simultaneously, and this is going to have impacts on how we get around. What we need to do then is to be really good at communicating, and this is our effort to do so. We want a sustained, sincere, strategic approach to communications that we will be able to manage all of our messaging through. We are doing that through creating partnerships in ways we never have before. Internal partnerships are our first ramping up, I'll call it. There's as many as 12 that we've counted that will have to be connected just internally in the service areas, ranging from transportation to construction admin, communications, the permit for approved works process, emergency services, and so forth. And we're doing that with the contractors. So this is an image there that you see of our first meeting with the contractors for Dundas Place, which includes Edward Soldo smiling, which is, I understand, a rare slide, but we're setting off with the right foot. We also have external partnerships, and because of these are downtown, our primary external partner is going to have to be the Downtown London organization. We have already met with them and used their database of their membership, which includes property owners and their tenants, to start letting them know what's coming down the pike. Then we are going to be communicating through various communications channels, which don't have the communications plan for you now, but it will go through the local media. We're going to be contacting through London Transit Commission and the emergency services police areas, community associations and what have you. These partnerships, external, aren't limited even to London. In order to know how to do better in construction projects, we've looked further afield. We've been on the phone with partners in Halifax. We visited Kitchener. So we're trying to learn from others who have done similar stuff that we're about to start doing. Business relations will be of primary concern because we know that the downtown, the core area for the whole city, is a big business center. It's an employment center. People make their livelihoods here. People have to get here and get home. And that's on the day-to-day basis for those who are occupying buildings. And then there's also the economic impact for people who are traveling to London and going to maybe a Knights game or a summer festival. So our external relationships that have to do with business relations are something that I'll be attending myself to quite a bit in the next 18 to 24 months. We'll have face-to-face meetings. We'll be listening and logging problems. We're going to be problem solving. We're going to be trying to do it in real time with our communications section that Megan's going to be telling you a little bit about. And we're going to have member engagement events. This is one such member engagement event we already had a couple Mondays ago. On a Monday morning, businesses came out. My experience would be to expect maybe 8 or 10 to come out. We had about 40, so the interest is very keen on how things will unfold for construction, not just on Dundas Place, but in the future on the other projects as well. So now Megan's going to take you through how that downtown stuff fits into a wider program of construction communications and administration, and then I'll come back to wrap it up.
All right, so in terms of communicating city-wide road impacts, we're going to continue to be using Renew London as the primary source of that information. Construction Admin has been working very close with us in communications to identify ways to enhance the program through its functionality, the content that goes on it, and overall user experience. So those are things we can look forward to moving forward. We actually have one update coming through later this month. What you can see in the image here is a shot of a Renew London training session. More than 20 divisions were invited to participate in this training session, and we really focused on making those entries helpful, including information such as detour routes, and really giving Londoners some more context to the issue that's posted on the Renew London site. We're also committed as communications and construction admin partnership to make sure that these entries are being logged with as much advance notice as possible. So in addition to the work we're doing to improve communications citywide, we're also putting a strategic focus on connecting the core. So communicating how all of these core construction projects are connected. Let's see here. Okay, so as part of this, we're going to be revamping a lot of our core communications materials. So things like signage around the city, the letters that go to businesses and property owners, you're going to start to see some messaging that really reflects the vision for our core. And the goal of this is to really help reduce confusion among the general public and really connect it all for Londoners. Another key component of our core communication strategy will be sharing experiences along the way. So the photo here shows sewers being installed back in the 1900s, but as we dig things up through core construction this year, we're going to uncover things much older than this. And we look at that as an opportunity to engage Londoners, to connect with our heritage, and really get people involved with the construction process along the way. Another component of our core construction strategy will be identifying champions. So the people in our greater core area who are really embracing core construction and some of the key values, such as connectivity, a greener environment, the capacity to grow, and the ease of navigation through the city. So we'll be looking for those champions, and we'll be helping leverage their stories throughout the process as well. Another large component of our core construction communication strategy would be community building. So we really want to get to know the people in our core, collaborate with the communities in any way that we can, whether it's through activations or events, and really involving them along the way. A perfect example of this will be Dundas Place. As you know, it's not just an infrastructure project, it's a placemaking project. So as part of that, we're going to be launching a transitional logo and tagline and campaign that really focuses on community building and getting those people who are part of that Dundas Place community involved. And I will pass it back over to Jim.
So Dundas Place, being an infrastructure project that is also a placemaking project, is going to be particularly interesting for management of communications and messaging, and also detours around it and stuff. Because I always use the metaphor of open heart surgery. We are going to open the patient up, and we're going to look deep down underneath the ground, and we're going to be making sure all the infrastructure that we needed to replace or update is going to be done. And then when we put everything back and sew the patient back up, we're going to have it better than when we started. And that's going to be a journey. It's going to involve disruption. It's going to involve having people have proper access to their businesses and being able to have their refuse collected without skipping a beat. And that's our commitment about sincere and sustained and strategic, and getting out how we manage these things. With the Dundas Place project, we're moving from My Dundas, which you probably see in the banners down Dundas Street, and you say My Dundas CA for all our project updates. And that will soon be changing to DundasPlace.ca, where the progress on taking the vision for Dundas and actually constructing it is going to be logged, and that will be the go-to place for communications updates. That'll be, we're intending to have videos put on there from time to time, whatever that we can to have a permanent log of how we're dealing with Dundas Place specifically. That's not the only project in town, but it's going to be one of the most complicated ones, being where it is in the city center. In order to do that as well as we can think of doing, we've also got a full-time person, Johnny Nye, who's from our construction admin unit, who's going, and he goes by the name of Johnny, even though it's Jonathan. He's going to be out there meeting with businesses. He already has been out on site. It's going to be him who will have a construction update blog specific to Dundas Place. He'll be able to answer technical questions with the administration of the construction project, which I'm not qualified to answer. And then when there's an issue between how it affects people moving around the site, how it affects businesses and people go to work on the site, he and I are going to be fast friends, because we're going to have to get the communications out ahead of time on how to deal with what's coming, or if we have surprises, and there are bound to be surprises in a project like this, how we can deal with them as fast as humanly possible. So that's our kind of story in a nutshell. If we have any specific questions, we'll try to answer them today. You'll see more and more coming out through the communications division as time goes on.
Thank you for the presentation. Committee, are there questions after that? Councillor Park?
Thank you, and welcome, Mr. Ianchula, to your first Civic Works meeting. I have a question regarding communications. I am very keen to see the new blog coming out and all those types of things, because I think they'll be integral to making sure people know what's going on, when it's going on. Does this function have the capabilities of sending SMS texts out to people, or is it straight up people have to click a link, go to a website? Because that's kind of a two-step process that I don't see a whole lot of people following unless the information's coming to them.
Through the chair, the new website will contain a blog that can be sent to people through email. There's also new plugins and options we can add to it over time, such as live chat. But to start out, we're going to be launching a blog that can be sent to people's emails that people can subscribe to.
Okay. I will need a mover and seconder for the report. Councillor Park, seconded by Deputy Mayor Hubert. And any more comments? Councillor Usher.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to thank you very much for the presentation. It looks very impressive, and I think that we're going somewhere with this. I think that from what I see there, I feel comfortable that hopefully I'll know everything that's happening along the way. And that's fine for us as part of the municipality. But will the ordinary Joe and Mary out on the streets, the residents, the constituents? Will they be able to plug in and see what's going on and what's happening?
So can I just understand a little bit deeper what you mean by plug in and know what's happening? Or do you mean like through some media platform or coming around to the construction site and watching, or?
Some people like to be informed. Some people like to know what's happening on a regular basis. And they want to be able to go somewhere and say, oh, they're doing this on Dundas Street today, or doing this on York Street project today. The status or highlights I'm looking for.
Okay, so I think part of the answer I might have, and if there's anything supplemental, I know Megan will too, but the first thing is knowing what's happening ahead of getting there is going to be a really important thing here. So we are putting together a communications plan that will have media, sustained regular media push out so that you would hear it maybe like in the morning after the weather or something. What's happening in the core area today? Which street, what's the best route to get to where you're going? The message is going to be whenever and however possible positive, how you can get somewhere, not how something's blocked. There's a detour and it's going to be blocked is not the communications message that we want to put forth, because we will keep the circulation flowing through the core and beyond the core. In order to do that, we're going to have to tell people. The other push out of message will be, as Megan was saying, through our media platforms, so that if you didn't hear it on the news and you want to get an alert, we're going to figure out a way to get you the alert that you need. I don't know exactly about the platforms we'll choose yet. We've got a budget that we have to work in, and we've got technical capabilities that we have to work in through IT, but we're committed to doing that. We don't want it to be reactive. We actually want it to be proactive. We want people to know. And on the third thing, I'm not sure if it was implied or not, but we are aiming to work with our partners to make something that's going to be difficult and challenging also fun, so that when you finally get in the midst of the construction zone, there's something to look at. We will have the coming soon, this is what it's going to look like, signs posted beyond the construction area so that you'll know what you're coming up to and seeing being constructed. But there's also going to be special events that we'll be holding too, to create interest and sustain the desire to kind of move forward to get to the other side.
Councillor Usher?
I thank you for that. I had some stuff here. One was communication. You answered that. The scheduling, I think I mentioned that at the beginning. But I have two more items that hit me when I read this particular report. And it probably doesn't concern you right now, but the rest of the staff. And it's to do with, number one, contractors. I read a column here where there's a lot of work that has to be done this year by us and many other people. And there's only so many contractors out there. In other words, there's only so many resources. Do you see a problem bigger than we might anticipate with getting the work done at a reasonable cost in the year 2018? I know that in the past we've been fortunate because we sort of go out for bid at the early part of the year when all the jobs are not out there yet and we get a reasonable raise. When I read this, I tend to think that, oh, so costs are going up. Could you enlighten me a little?
Ms. Scher?
Thank you, and through the chair. Certainly, when we see major investment in infrastructure in Ontario and nationwide, there's always concern about both costs and availability of contractors. So far, with the work that we've been putting out, we've been quite proactive about trying to get things out early this year. We have not seen challenges outside of our budgets. So we are within costs and within estimates. We have been receiving bids on the work we've been putting to market. We certainly monitor this, and it is something we're concerned about, but at this time, we are trending towards being able to do all the work that we've been tasked to do on budget and within the resources available in the industry.
Thank you. Was there a follow-up, Councillor Usher? Yes. Okay.
So to follow up with that, in the year 2018, you talk about a certain amount of work that we have. We are going to get those tendered in time for us to get a reasonable price?
Ms. Scher?
Through the chair, actually, the majority of our work for 2018 is already out to tender and going through award processes. And as we've been getting more information about some of the longer-term programs related to green infrastructure, we're proactively looking towards future years as well, so we can ensure that we remain ahead of the season and the curve. And the sooner they can actually get out on site and start working, the better it is for us in terms of making sure we're also done before it freezes.
And Madam Chair, my other subject is to do with material. I've been, and I know that you have also, Mrs. Chair, about material. Some of the projects that we've been doing over the past, I'll use the word over the past 20 years, because some of them are Commissioner's Road. That's the reason why I use 20 years. I know that Commissioner's Road was done around 1999 or 2000, but there are some that were done more recent. And a couple of people, one in particular, have identified to me that there has been degradation, I will call it, or erosion, whatever you want to call it, in some of the material that was used in some of these streets. I'm not going to name the streets. You probably know some of them. You've probably heard about but I've noticed some myself. What do we do when we have a contract probably for 2 or 3 years, but then beyond that, the material may not work as well at certain temperatures, like below zero. Do we have any way of going back to a contractor to say, look, the road that you built there, it hasn't even served 5 or 6 years or 10 years, whatever it is. Do we have a way of going back to them and say something to them, or do we have a way of research this material or specify this material before it's placed?
Ms. Scher, do you want to speak to warranties in our contract as they are right now and material options?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So we do have standards and specifications for mixed design that are used for our roadways, and there are a number of standards and specifications that we do consider approved for the City of London for use, and they are designed for cold weather for our climates here. At times, we have done some work around new innovation in those standards and specs, and I believe some of those roadways have created some recent concern in terms of how well they're holding up. We have a warranty period associated with our contracts, and when that warranty period is expired, we don't really have a mechanism through the contract to go back to a contractor and say, you know, it's 5 years after paving and we're seeing deterioration. There potentially could be some mechanism through the legal system, but I think that would be a fairly lengthy and difficult process. The big thing that's important for us really is to ensure that when there's a contract underway, that we're doing appropriate referee testing and ensuring that the material that Londoners are paying for has been mixed properly and is being placed properly. I may ask Mr. Soldo if he wants to add anything additional to that.
Thank you through the chair. As Ms. Scher has indicated, we do have specifications for our pavement mixes, and we're constantly updating them based on best practices. There is some roadways that are exhibiting the stress that we hadn't anticipated from those specifications. When we did investigate and review those issues, it is related to a very specific part of the specification. This year, we did make a number of changes to our specifications to provide us with greater security in terms of moving forward to ensure that what we get in terms of pavement is something that will last us a longer period of time.
Thank you.
Thank you. I have Councillor Park, Squire, and Hubert, but I may have melded 2 lists, so I'll look to Councillor Park. I did. Councillor Squire?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate the report and I appreciate all the information on communications. And one of these projects is not the downtown projects, but the Western Road is in my ward, and it's going as I see it very well. But the one thing about the communication plan I want to stress is that your best communicators often are your councillors, your elected officials. We have contact with constituents on a wide basis in our areas, and we can often communicate very clearly and very succinctly to residents who have faith in us what different projects mean, what the repercussions be, and also our support as councillors and elected officials for those projects and that the disruption is going to be there, but that the end product is going to be very good. And I say that because I think you need to consider that, and I think it's a very important thing. And I don't mean talking points. I don't mean sending me and saying, say this. I don't need that. But I do need information, because often we can take that information and let the public know. And I'll give you an example. Downtown London. When you announce projects and expenditures in downtown London, often there's residents in my ward, Ward 6, who say, I never go downtown. How is downtown going to benefit me? Why is it a good thing? And I'd be happy to explain to them why it's a good thing, because I've supported most of these projects. But to do that, we need information. And I just think using councillors and elected officials as communicators is going to make your life a lot easier, and that's just a suggestion.
Thank you, Councillor Squire. Councillor Hubert.
Yeah, I think I want to back off from sort of the downtown focus, because the report carries a lot of other things that happened in 2017. And, you know, some of which is pretty good in terms of project completion. And I am on the right report, right? We've been so focused on the one thing. I just want to make sure. So page 107, you know, that we did $146 million of infrastructure. About 80% of that's out the door in terms of the spending on it. You know, a couple projects that ran a little late because you never know what's under the road until you get under the road, and that stuff happens. But I want to actually, the contractors that we use, and I'm a little surprised by the decrease in customer satisfaction, frankly. I'm not sure, you know, I'm not sure it's statistically significant. Let me just be the statistical geek on it. But I have to say, some of the contractors that I interacted with last year have gotten the message. They understand that it's not just about the road, and I think that's part of what Councillor Squire is alluding to. They understand that the road is being built in a neighborhood, or the sidewalks being done in a neighborhood, or this is having an impact on local residents in some way or another. And they've been outstanding at answering questions as residents come up to them and interrupt their work and ask them questions. So they become much more user-friendly, if I could put it that way. And I think that's a really good thing. In any work that we do with our contractors up front, I think that's another part of there's our internal partners, there are our external partners, is really a very positive thing. Because at the end of the day, you know, our construction administration people are not on site all the time, but the lead hands, the white hats from the contractors are, and they're the people interacting often with the public. So I thought last year was a pretty good year, and we actually ironed up some of the hiccups that had happened in previous years. So.
Thank you. Mayor Brown, and then Councillor Helmer.
There was a significant amount of work done in 2017, huge amount of work planned moving ahead, and I think the report covers off on that really well, and also recognizes, you know, lessons learned, and I think I certainly appreciate that. I wanted to limit my comments to the work of Mr. Yanchula and his team because I think that you've got it spot on. You know, I remember reading a book some time ago that was titled "It's not what we say, it's what they hear." And it just drives home the importance of communication. And the more complicated a situation, the more important it is that it be communicated as clearly as possible. And I really appreciated Mr. Yanchula's comments about a strategy that's sustained and sincere and strategic, because they're not always going to be good days through this project. It's massively complicated. These are really important projects that are part of our strategic plan, and also, you know, will have a significant impact on the water quality of our river and so many other things. And it's going to create some level of interruption in quality of life, and whether that's business or whether that's social, that will remain to be seen. But when you have clear lines of communication, then you can hear about the positives on the days when everything's working well, but most importantly, you can hear about early and identify the negative impacts that are occurring and address them. And I think that by increasing our ability to communicate, we increase our ability to be more accountable. And I think that's really important to people involved in downtown London, for example. So my compliments for moving in this direction. From my perspective, I know we asked for this to happen. I think you've got it spot on. And I think this will also serve as an excellent model as we move towards bus rapid transit implementation as well, and knowing how closely connected we need to be during implementation with those residents and businesses that will be impacted throughout that 10-year period of construction. So thank you. I'll leave my comments at that.
Thank you. Councillor Helmer.
Thank you. I wanted to ask about York Street in Dundas. And it says in the report that it's going to be staged road closures. I wonder if we could just spend a little bit of time talking about where we expect the detouring traffic to go when those road closures are in place. I know that there's a private project planned for York Street and Thames. I don't know exactly what their plans are for building the building there, but if there is detouring traffic coming along Thames Street, for example, from Horton, there is a little underpass there, but it's not very big. And I'm just wondering about where the cars are going to be detouring and how people are going to be getting to King Street, for example, when York and Dundas are both impacted.
Through the chair, we have here today Tom Copeland, who's the division manager of wastewater and drainage engineering. He's the division manager within that group. He's going to provide some commentary. Something else I'd like to note is that we will be working with Mr. Yanchula as suggested to try to facilitate and work with those the people that are actually living in these areas. There's some significant amounts of residential development in the area and the commercial industries as well. So I'll let Tom answer the specifics related to the diversions.
Thank you. Through the chair to the councillor. York Street will be done in phases. So what we're looking at as the first phase is the York and Thames intersection. So we want to complete that intersection so that when we get up to the next phases, we have that north-south route open. We've been communicating with Tricar, who are building the apartment building or condo building at 40 York Street, so we're coordinating our efforts with them. We had a report back a number of months ago where we came to the committee and we said due to safety, we wanted to close down York Street fully during construction, so that's our plan. So that Thames York Street is the first phase, get that complete and open, jump up to the next phase, which is the block between Thames and Talbot, get that underway, and then we're going to tackle the Talbot intersection. So only one intersection would be closed at any one time.
Further, if I could just add from an overall sort of broader transportation perspective, the goal really is to keep traffic moving north-south and along these key corridors, and then utilizing King Street and Queen Street to move about in the downtown. So there is lots of coordination occurring between the Dundas Place construction as well as the York Street construction to ensure not only that we have that we can move it east-west, but also that those key intersections allow for traffic to move north-south.
Did you have another follow-up?
Yeah, just a brief follow-up. I know that we've got the buses are also moving off of Dundas onto King and Queens. I just want to make sure everyone is understanding that it's going to be very busy on King and Queens for the entire summer. Like, all the buses are going to be moving there. A lot of detouring traffic that otherwise would have been on Dundas or York is going to be on those streets, and it's going to be very congested. You know, they can handle the traffic, but it's going to be busy. And I think people are going to need to be patient as we're working through. We just had, in 2017, Dundas closed for a stretch in Ward 4, and that was disruptive on its own. That was without, another one adjacent, a couple streets away, also closed. And this is right in the heart of downtown, so it's going to be tough. I'm really glad we're taking this kind of approach where we're really planning very carefully what's going to happen. Do this intersection first so that we can get that north-south part running again. I know we're going to do all we can to mitigate those impacts, but even given all that, it's still going to be quite a lot of change happening. Just the buses coming off would be quite a lot. And on top of that, we've got these two projects. So thanks very much.
Thank you. Looking to committee, I think we can open this vote. It's already been moved and seconded. And I do understand that everyone should be able to vote online now and move in second motions, so. Councillor Squire is going to vote yay.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 6-0.
Thank you. Moving on to item 3.3, were there some comments ahead of time or is staff just available to answer questions?
Through the chair, we have a brief presentation just outlining what we're proposing in this report. It's been a complicated process. It remains a complicated process. So Ms. Ramalou will walk you through a few quick slides about where we are in that process and where we're going next.
Okay, thank you.
So through the chair, thank you for the opportunity to provide information on our recommended approach for the next stage of the One River Master Plan environmental assessment. Today's presentation will be fairly brief. I just want to take you through our proposed approach for stage 2 and what our next steps are, because we are proposing some changes. So in quick review of how the project came about, it was through a series of reports in 2016 and into 2017 that Municipal Council directed that the One River Master Plan would study certain projects together, which included the future use of Springbank Dam and design alternatives for the Back to the River project. CH2M, which is now Jacobs Engineering, was awarded the One River study, and a team of Civitas and Stantec were appointed to undertake the preliminary design of the inaugural Back to the River project at the Forks of the Thames. As you may recall, an environmental assessment is made up of 5 phases. A master plan EA covers a minimum of the first 2 phases, which is how the One River Master Plan was originally structured. So it was known that some works would come out of this master plan that would require further studies to complete their Schedule EAs. So thus our process looked like this. We would select a preferred option for Springbank Dam, then review various river management strategies and develop an overall preferred strategy. This would identify concepts, mitigation measures, costs, and schedules for individual projects, which would then move into separate Schedule EA projects for completion. The original consultant assignment stopped short of completing these Schedule EAs. However, with Stage 1 complete, we have an endorsed preferred option for Springbank Dam. With that decision made, we are able to continue forward with alternatives for Back to the River project at the Forks, as well as identifying other improvements. Thus, the recommendation is to continue forwards with the completion of the Schedule B environmental assessment requirements for the decommissioning of the dam, as well as for selecting a preferred design alternative for the Forks. This would mean 3 streams of work would be completed concurrently under the One River umbrella, so 1 river, 3 streams. This way, the city continues to achieve the cost efficiencies of having 1 consultant working on the 3 streams, which share much of the same environmental requirements and should be closely coordinated. By splitting them into their respective EAs, though, but still working on them concurrently, it ensures that the process, if the process is delayed for one of those streams, the others can continue on to completion without also being delayed. As such, the next steps are to undertake the additional environmental studies required to the level of detail required for those EAs, refinement of the hydraulic model to consider river management strategies, and then of course the EA process comes with additional public, stakeholder, and First Nations engagement. Some work that does not require further EA study, such as invasive species management, may be able to proceed within existing programs. So at the end of our One River Master Plan, the final report will address preferred alternatives with cost estimates and timelines. At that time, the three streams would be in a position to move into next stages, such as detailed design, but only as directed by council. This consultant award stops at the end of the EA stage. So with that, I'm happy to turn it back to the chair for any questions or comments.
Thank you very much. Questions? Councillor Van Hulst and Deputy Mayor Hubert.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and through you. The great thing about the approach that we took with the dam is that we just saved a great deal of work by deciding ahead of time whether the water was going to be high or low. There's a bunch of projects we didn't have to look into. And I'm concerned about, or I would like us to do something similar with the projects going on. For instance, in the design, there are some things that I won't be supporting later on, no matter what. And so I would like to see a list of projects or potential projects come to council so we can pick which ones that we might actually want the consultants to look at, rather than waste money having them look at certain things. And I'm sure they could be telling us things that we don't need to know. For instance, because we're not closing Kensington Bridge, we won't be putting swooshes at the base of Dundas Street. So that's another thing they don't need to look at. So that would be something I would like to do. Is there a possibility to do that? Because I'd also point out that we bought 5 designs, and it's council's prerogative to choose anything from those and mix and match and put those together. And that's a process I would like us to do. So if we could have a comment on how that might be possible.
Mr. Mathers?
Through the chair. So currently, we've been requested, and this was a previous council resolution, to look at the ribbon of the Thames concept and try to develop a preliminary design around that concept. And there was a visualization of that was shown here. So that's our current current work plan is based on. If there's a different opinion, then that could be changed. With respect to the other projects for the river alternatives or looking at the dam, we will be bringing forward all of those things to council and committee for their discussion and for their thoughts in the future.
Ms. Ramalou, did you want to add on? Okay. Councillor?
Okay, so just for clarification, so before this goes to the consultant, we'll have a chance to vet what they look at, what they'll be looking at. You know, for instance, we've got a bridge, what's been titled the Bridge to Nowhere. Will we have a chance to decide whether or not the consultants will even look at that?
Through the chair, the consultants will be provided the ribbon of the Thames concept, which does include the bridge, and that's part of the assignment that's before you today. So if that's something that's not being supported, then that would be something that you wouldn't be supporting this work plan, because that's what the work plan is based on. Because that was the previous resolution of council, was to look towards those opportunities that were in the ribbon of the Thames concept. That being said, I can say that speaking to the consulting team, that we have significant concerns with the bridge as is currently shown, because the previous work that we've done as part of the Springbank Dam assessment shows that there are species at risk in the general area. So you're likely to see different opportunities that wouldn't include the bridge as you currently see it in those images. So you're likely to see something different, but what the consultants will be looking at is that ribbon of the Thames concept as previously addressed by council, for us to move forward with a proposed design on.
Okay, so thank you. So Madam Chair, if we wanted to inject another point for council approval, we would have to, like, it's been more than a year that was passed, so we would have to refer that back to staff and ask for that opportunity. I might do that at council, but thank you for the opportunity to ask the question.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Hubert.
Thank you. Actually, the last answer is a little helpful. So I'd like to understand where things like water levels and those sorts of things fit into this. Would this be part of this? Is that the hydrology that you're looking at? I'll take that as a nod, and then I'll ask my second question. And so I guess the question I have with respect to it is, and I have a funding question as well, is the comment around the resolution of council with respect to the ribbon on the Thames. And that came forward anticipating a certain level of water. And as we know, at certain times of the year, it's more mud flats than it is a river. How do we work that out? Because it has to be attractive before we spend the amount of money that would cost. And Lord knows that a good portion of the we need to get rid of the dam was around species at risk. If there was no species at risk in that, I think we would have had maybe a significantly different conversation. So I'm not sure how we balance all that, because one decision was made some number of years ago. We've moved forward. I don't want to feel married or tied to a design that may not be appropriate today.
Through the chair, we have met with Civitas to discuss some of the changes since that initial design was created. And absolutely, what they envisioned did have a different water level than what's going to be the case moving forward. So they are fairly comfortable that they'll be able to adapt and still maintain the vision that they had for the area and develop a new concept. As part of their preliminary design, we've requested, and that was part of the initial consultant appointment, was to look at 3 different versions of what that area could look like. That doesn't include the imagery and the visualizations they've currently constructed. So we're anticipating that through this process that we'd be bringing back to committee and to the public a new version that will be mindful of the water levels that will be experienced in the future in this area.
Deputy Mayor.
And from a funding point of view, from a financing point of view, I'm not sure it's clear on this. Have we tapped into the settlement money that we got from the dam? And, you know, is the balance of that being held for the disposition of the dam? And can you help clarify that?
Mr. Mathers.
Through the chair, the original assignment for the Back to the One River EA, all of that funding came from the Back to the River budget. So there was approximately $900,000. All of that funding came from that initiative. What we've done as part of this assignment, because there's still some work to do on Back to the River, which is the Schedule B activities. We've used some of the funding from Springbank Dam, which is really just a balancing off of the funding that we use for the dam from Back to the River on the Back to the River initiative. Moving forward, any spending from the Springbank Dam account would be spent on something that directly is related to the dam unless we're given a different direction from council.
Okay, that's helpful. At a future date, I'm not sure when this comes back. I have one other question, Madam Chair. It would be helpful to have an accounting on the Springbank Dam account, okay? Just so we can kind of monitor that. My final question is around the schedule on page 118 of the agenda. And much of, like, the draft master plan is completed late Q3 of this year. Then, you know, Q4 we have, so I guess that would be sort of summer to September. And then Q4, we're going to have the public review and a set of public information centers. And I'm just going to throw it out there, Madam Chair, for considerations. And it's unfortunate, all the comms people left, okay? Except for those that write about us in the back. This is a comms problem. We're heading into a municipal election. And so you're going to be fighting for attention with, I don't know, 60, 70 other candidates who are fighting for airtime as well. And so I think we need to take that back to the communications people. And we know what kind of a mess it happens when the comm side of projects like this goes south on us. And so it doesn't matter if it's 3 streams or 1 stream and 1 river. Somehow we have to figure out how we're going to do that so there's the appropriate community engagement on that. And if that means, you know, quite frankly, and council may actually be lame duck anyhow. So there may be an issue there where this should be considered under the new council. But I'm just concerned, and I know I have a public town hall meeting this week. I know that I'm going to have questions about the Springbank Dam. And I want to be able to tell people that there'll be an appropriate opportunity for them to engage in this, and at a time that they're not distracted by a municipal election.
Thank you. Are you just leaving your thoughts for consideration or looking for a response? Thank you. Councillor Usher.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Councillor Hubert just mentioned part of what I'm going to say, so I'm going to not touch that. I think that he described it eloquently. My other question is to do with the cost and the scheduling. This $1 million, this up to $1 million, this will cover all of Schedule 3, is it? Schedule B. And so after that is really construction time, or is it additional design? What I'm trying to get at is that, is Jacobs going to come back to us for more money?
Mr. Mathers, did you want to cover that, or Ms. Ramalou?
Through your worship, through your chair. Absolutely. The cost is very important when it comes into any of these type of projects. And I don't have a crystal ball. I know that the work plan that's been developed here, we've tried to think of all of the things that can happen as part of a process like this, an EA process. So we feel that it's a solid work plan, that we have the funding that's required to move forward with this. And we think that this is the appropriate amount of money for the project.
So, Madam Chair, I'm going to ask my question in a different way just for a minute, just to see if... so, will CH2M and or Jacobs be involved with Schedule C? Or the rest of Schedule C? In other words, Phase 3, 4?
I apologize through the chair as well. Jacobs Engineering, their work would be completed at the end of the EA process. Following that, we'd be looking at bringing this forward through the strategic plan process, because for a number of these projects, there's no funding currently available. If council decides to proceed with an actual design and construction of the works that are outlined in this EA, there would be a separate process to hire the consultant for that. So it would be usually, if it was a large project, a 2-stage RFQ, RFP process.
Perfect, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I don't see any other comments or questions, so I need a mover and a seconder. We'll move by Councillor Usher, seconded by Mayor Brown, and then Councillor Squire does have a comment.
Do you want me to go ahead, Madam Chair? Yes, please. Yeah, I just want to echo what Councillor Van Holst and Councillor Hubert said. I mean, the first issue for me is that, as many people will know, I've never voted in favor of the Back to the River project. And I always had concerns about what was the cost of it going to be, what the engineering of it was going to be. And the more strictly we adhere to just by the numbers recreation of Back to the River, regardless of cost and design, the more difficult it's going to be for me to just say, well, that's the only option we have, folks, so I've got to support it and spend that money. So I just want to say that clearly. The second thing is, there is a little infrastructure project going on right now called BRT that's going to carry on through the election period. And Councillor Hubert's quite right. To land another project in the middle of that is going to be unbelievable from the point of view of a councillor who represents a ward that's very affected by BRT. The last thing I want to say, and I meant to say this much earlier, we always use this phrase, back to the river, as if London's turned its back to the river. And I just, you know, my ward at Ward 6 has Gibbons Park in it, which has the river going all around it, and people utilize it all the time. We've developed the Thames Valley Parkway, where I can go from one part of the city all the way to Springbank Park, right along the river in a natural setting. So I know it's been said this many times that we've turned our back to the river. From my point of view, certainly the people I know and myself and the people in my ward have never turned their back on the river, and they like to use it in a natural setting. And they do that every day by running, walking, and biking. So I just want to make that clear, that the river is important. And it's not just, again, one project that defines our relationship with the river.
Thank you. Councillor Morgan and then Van Holst.
Thank you, Chair, for recognizing me at your meeting. I dropped by to listen to my colleagues in the presentation on this item from staff. I want to remind colleagues what we did approve and what we didn't approve related to this project and how we funded it. We did approve endorsing a concept design, but certainly not committing to each and every piece and details in that concept design. It's a framework to work from for the Back to the River project. But during the multi-year budget, we passed a motion on that business case to authorize an amount of $700,000. This was back in 2016 to complete the necessary environmental assessment. It was funded from the hydro dividend, and we basically allocated about $5 million for the project, put it in the Economic Development Reserve Fund, authorized $700,000 of that for the EA. And that it says upon the release of the final environmental assessment, confirmation of the approval of the project costs and confirmation of any external sources of financing is when we would authorize actually constructing the Back to the River project. And so we may have approved a concept, we may have allocated some money on the side, but we certainly haven't decided to move forward with any particular design in any sort of way. But I think this is important for what the staff is trying to do in the financing of this. And I appreciate that Mr. Mather said that they're trying to, for lack of a better term, pay back the part of the $700,000 for the work that was done for the Springbank Dam portion of the EA, because I think that's a very appropriate use of the money, because certainly when we authorized the EA, it was under the concept that it would fund, fully in my mind, the Back to the River work on the EA. And so it seems like it nets out to me fine when I look at the numbers. I would prefer it, in the future to be a lot cleaner, and I know we're tidying that up. It would be better to, refund the money to that particular reserve fund and then, then authorize, or pay for the Springbank portion of the EA out of the other one. But we didn't know we had that money in the same way we had it at the time. So I think what staff is doing is appropriate to balance it out. But I do want to ensure that we track the money that we authorized for that particular Back to the River project and that we're using some of it for the Springbank Dam. Seems very appropriate to me, but it does make it, I think, a little bit confusing for the public. Seems to me when I do the numbers, the work on the potential Back to the River project is still proceeding within around the original envelope that we allocated when we first approved this in the multi-year budget. That being said, I think we can proceed with this, and I'll make my decisions on the project at the appropriate time down the road.
Thank you. Councillor Van Hulst, I just realized it's second round. Did you have a second comment that you wanted to make to this discussion?
Yes, thank you, if you don't mind. And just bouncing off of what Councillor Hubert said, and in terms of a communication, I've noticed here that what we often do is coin new phrases by appending the word fatigue to a word. And if it hasn't been said, controversy fatigue is something that I myself am suffering from these days. And so it'd be great if we could just tweak this one so that it's not a controversial one, and because there are things that people would complain about potentially with this project, but if before we moved ahead we could make it be something that people are largely in agreement with, I think that would be very helpful. So those are my comments.
Thank you. I do have a motion that's been moved and seconded. You'll see that up on screen in just a moment for a vote. The vote should be open on screen for you now. Councillor Squires voting manually.
No, he's in.
Oh, whoa.
It wasn't plugged in.
Rewind the tape, whoa. Okay. The mayor may be voting online.
Now he's okay.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 6-0.
Okay, thank you. We'll move along to item number 4. And on item amendments to traffic and parking bylaw, there is already one amendment that staff are putting forward. And I want to look to the committee because I would like to remove a specific item, and it's the Devonshire parking item. And the reason I would like to remove it is A, I have a suggestion, but B, there's a potential delegation request. So I'd like to put forward my suggestion. And if not, I think that we should wait to hear the delegation prior to making a decision on that. So I'll look to the clerks for the staff recommended amendment to part 4, and then I will put forward the second portion. Perhaps Mr. McGuire could let us know what changes you are suggesting that we make in regards to Cheapside.
Through the chair, at the in the report, there's an amendment to the school zone speed limit on, it's actually shown in figure 23, page 144. It shows for Maitland Street to also include Cheapside Street from Maitland over to William. The Roman Catholic Church at the corner of Cheapside and Maitland is a common access way through for people on Cheapside to the church, to the school. So in the amendment, it does include a 40-kilometer-an-hour speed limit reduction on Cheapside Street from Maitland to William.
Thank you, Mr. McGuire. Councillor Squire, would you like to speak to this as well?
Yeah, if I could speak to the amendment. First of all, I want to thank staff for recognizing. We had talked about that at the last meeting. I think Councillor Morgan had a similar situation where a side street was also an entrance point for a school. And in this particular case, the children who go to St. Michael's Catholic School may have two entrances. One is on Maitland and one is on Cheapside. So I'm really happy we could make that amendment today. It actually just makes sense for the safety of the children in that area. And Madam Chair, it'll make my priest happy.
Okay, so I've just received some advice from the clerk, and so I thought I would bring to committee's attention the parking restriction recommendation for Devonshire. I believe there's been some communications that have been received about that. There's some attached. And so I see two paths here. One, we have a delegation request. And so if we would like to hear that delegation request, we would invite them to the next meeting. And so that portion should be removed from the bylaw today, and we would deal with it at the next meeting. The other path that we could take, and I consulted with staff on this, is that the numbers were very close. So we do a mail-out survey. We need to have a certain percentage back. We met our criteria, but I believe that it was very close. And so what we could do is suggest to staff that we resurvey and hope that more of the street responds so that it's a bit more definitive. And so I look to committee as the chair. I can't do either, but I would be looking for either refer this portion to the next meeting so we can hear the delegation, or a suggestion to refer it back for a parking survey. Deputy Mayor.
I would suggest referring it back. Okay? Yeah. Send it back, get more input. Survey probably went out when it was cold, so it didn't get answered.
Councillor Helmer, did you want to comment as well?
Yeah, I hear what my colleagues are suggesting, and I mean, it seems like that's what you might do. I would say be careful about referring things back. We do a survey and the results come back and some people don't like them. And then we do another survey. Well, what if the results are not enough people vote the next time? Or it goes the other way. And then the people who wanted to have the change happen, they say, you did the survey results came back and said, yeah, get rid of it. You didn't like what the survey said, so you ignored it and you did another survey. I think that's a very dangerous direction to be going in. I understand why people who want to keep the parking the way it is want to have another survey. But I think you need to be very careful about it.
Councillor Usher.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I also have a concern about setting it back for a second survey, at this time at least. I've experienced this in the past where we've had a survey and then some people down the street didn't like it, so they went personally and banged on every door and got a different response. And obviously we couldn't take that. And then we did another survey, and then it didn't change from our previous survey, even though the banging on the door came back differently. But there were repercussions on that, and you could speak to many residents and they're going to give you different opinions about the door thing. If my neighbor come to me and knock on my door, I'll probably say yes. For something that the survey, I may look at it and say no. So I don't have a problem with having the individual here. The problem with having the individual is that the individual will bring a list of sheet of their survey. That is part of the problem that I don't like. But I'm quite prepared to listen to the individual. But I'm not going to vote in favor of resurvey. Not at this time anyway. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. And I think I see your point in terms of a neighbor at the door versus a staff or a sanctioned survey. My concern with the delegation is that the person who's opposing the proposed change has asked for a delegation. Should we make a different decision, then what happens to people that were in support of the change? When is their opportunity to delegate to committee? That was my thought behind a more strongly worded mail-out survey asking people to respond either way so that we can get a better sense. I wonder if staff want to share the numbers. Do you have those available? If not, that's okay, but perhaps that might give committee a sense of how close the numbers were.
Thank you. Through the chair to the committee. In terms of the number of residents that were impacted by the survey, letters were sent out to 39 property owners, and we had 21 respond. Of that 21 response, 12 were in support of the change and 9 opposed the change. The timeline over which the survey was done was in December. The deadline was extended for 2 weeks to deal with the holidays. But it is, 54% is not a great return in terms of the response rate.
So I don't know if that helps the committee to understand why I thought perhaps a more strongly worded and gentle email from, or real mail letter from staff kind of stressing the importance of responding, so that we do value their opinion and want a good response from the street as to what they're looking for. So I'll go to Councillor Park. She's put up her hand, and I'm doing a lot of talking from the chair, so I'll go back to Usher after.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think that the remarks that Councillor Helmer made were quite right. And in this particular situation, we don't have the ward councillor here, nor have we had any communication from the ward councillor, and I think that that would give a lot more heft into referring this back. I don't agree that referring it back is appropriate at this time. As Councillor Helmer said, we've been in situations like this, in my own ward in particular, talking about speed bumps or no speed bumps, and then the vote is what the vote is, and we have to live by how that vote has been carried out. So I won't be supporting referring this back at this time.
And Councillor Usher?
Well, Madam Chair, we have talked about the survey in the past, and I've heard this word, strongly worded survey, in the past. And, I I don't know what is a more strongly worded survey. What will happen if we do this and we have a survey that went out 6 months ago and people voted in a different way when there were some other people who didn't like that? I just think that we're setting a dangerous precedent here. So to make a long story short, I'm not going to vote in favor of sending this, of resurveying. So depending on what the motion is asking for.
Okay, we don't have a motion up right now. The clerk was working with me as I was managing that. In that, we're looking for a vote just on this.
In the meantime, if I just draw to the committee's attention to the screen, you'll see the third line from the bottom is actually the change that was added with respect to Cheapside Street.
Okay, so we're going to do a vote with the motion moved by Deputy Mayor Hubert and seconded by myself to resurvey Devonshire. So that's the vote up, just that portion right now. Yeah, so the vote right now is just on the one portion, and it's that the portion of the bylaw be referred to staff to resurvey the residents. This is specific to just the Devonshire, no parking.
Closing the vote, the motion fails 2-3.
Okay, thank you. And so with the delegation in mind, I look to the committee. Are you interested in referring that portion to the next Civic Works so we can hear the delegation? Councillor Usher.
Madam Chair, I'm quite prepared to move the motion to refer it to allow the delegation.
You also do have the option, just to be clear, I was only giving you two options. You could just pass the bylaw as is.
I'm happy to move the original staff recommendation and noting that we received the communication from Dr. Jackson and P. Churchill.
Okay. Deputy Mayor Hubert will second that. So it's to move the entire staff recommendation, note communications received. That vote should be on your screen now.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Okay, that resolves all of 4.1. So moving on to 4.2.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm going to make a motion to refer this back to staff so they can identify additional areas that the Transportation Advisory Committee can help out.
Thank you, and I will second that motion. I'm unable to make motions from the chair, so I'd ask the vice chair to make that motion ahead of time. In review of the work plan, I know that Civic Administration identified for me areas that they would very much like the support and to work with TAC committee, and so we have dealt with their work plan a number of times and sent it back. I think we're almost there, and what I would very much like is to have Civic Administration weigh in, add those items that are in line with our strategic plan, and really help this committee to move some of those projects forward. So thank you, Councillor Park, for making that motion on my behalf. Is there any other discussion on that course of action? Correct. I think it'll delay things one cycle, but I didn't see anything pressing that had to move forward, and it gives our staff an opportunity to help with the work plan. It seemed the most straightforward way is to refer the whole report and then have that come back to us.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 4-0.
Okay, next item is the Waste Management Working Group report. We can have a mover and a seconder. Councillor Usher will move it. Councillor Park will second it. We'll open the vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 4-0.
Thank you. And 4.4, if I can get a mover and a seconder. Moved by Park, seconded by Squire. Put it on for a vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 4-0.
Thank you. Deferred matters. Any changes? If not, can I get a mover and a seconder? Moved by Squire, seconded by Park. We'll put that on the screen for a vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 4-0.
Thank you, and I'm going to turn over the chair to Councillor Park. I forgot in looking at the audit that I'm going to declare a pecuniary interest on item 5.2, as my husband actually works for Spectra Energy with Union Gas, so I don't think that would be a good report for me to be voting on, so I'll turn the chair to Councillor Park and recuse myself for this item.
I'll take the chair from here, putting 5.2. Can I have a mover? Thank you, Councillor Squire, seconded by Councillor Usher, unless there's discussion.
I'd be happy to second it if you just allow staff to just give me a synopsis of this, because I think that this is new on the agenda. There's a lot of stuff here, so I don't intend to read it, but if they could just give me a synopsis, I'm sure. Anything that Mr. Stanford is for, I was going to say against, but I'm for. I'm just kidding.
Thank you, and through the acting chair. A quick overview of this project. Back in November, or actually October of last year, the city, through council, applied for 5 projects under the green, under one of the green funds that results in dollars from the cap and trade program. And a specific name of that program was the Municipal Greenhouse Gas Challenge Fund. 5 projects went in, and today on your agenda, we actually have 2 projects. And the first up is this one referred to as fuel switching. And what we mean by that is we're looking at moving a portion of our fleet, it would be the garbage trucks, from current use of diesel to compressed natural gas. Now, we put that project forward into the mix, and we were quite happy to hear from the province about a month ago that we were successful and that we'd have to negotiate with them a transfer payment agreement. And that was completed just last Thursday, and that is one reason why you received this report as an added item. This particular project has 2 key components. First and foremost, though, it requires that we complete our business case. And Doing that will allow us to determine fully whether this project actually makes complete sense for the city. And that's really important to note because the province has supported that direction as well. But the project itself is about changing the way we maintain our garbage trucks. We would have to actually make adjustments at the environment, at the sort of the Exeter Road Operations Center to allow us to maintain compressed natural gas vehicles. The facility itself would have to be upgraded for safety and building code reasons. The second part of this project is you have to fuel these vehicles, and these service stations don't exist right now in the London area. But we're aware of, through Union Gas, a facility coming in along the 401, which would be just ideal for the City of London, not only for our ability to potentially have our garbage trucks fuel there, but also for any businesses in London that are looking for the opportunity to move from diesel to compressed natural gas. So part two of this project is looking at an upgrade at that facility to allow space for the City of London to fuel up its garbage trucks, and over a period of time, all our garbage fleet would move to that location. So this project has really great value from the perspective of potential cost savings, environmental benefit, and then this ability basically add to economic development in the London area. As I mentioned before, we first step out of the gate though will be to complete our business case in June, July of this year and bring that back to committee and council. The province in this case is putting forward funding of upwards of $691,000. And your package today includes a source of financing that due to the sort of the 11th hour completion of this report, the source of financing is incorrect. It needs to mention that it's coming from the EEE fund, and that is the only minor change to the report that's before you. And the Deputy City Clerk is aware of this, and a new form would be brought forward in time for council. I have confirmed with Jason Davies here that the correct form has actually already been produced, so where the funding is coming from is confirmed from that particular account.
Thank you, Mr. Stanford. I'm going to let the Deputy Clerk speak.
Yes, we just received email of that fact. What I would suggest the committee do is approve the source of financing as the EEE reserve, noting that the updated source of financing document will be provided with the report to council.
Okay, looking to committee for comments. Councillor Usher.
Here's something I don't quite understand. So the province is putting $691,000 of the total $1,382,000, and we are putting $681,000. It looks like. I'm trying to figure out. I'm looking at the table on page 189. And it talks about a 681, then it talks about a 701. Can you help me understand what that is saying?
Through the chair.
Sorry.
Through the chair, on the table, it does say 681. That just represents phase 2A. But when you add together 681 and the 701, that is where you come out to the total of 1.38 million. And the province basically is splitting that price with us as part of this TPA. So we're both paying $691,000 and change.
Okay, and Mr. Stanford, once more, where are we getting our 691 from? Because this is addition to the budget, the capital budget, right?
Through the chair, that is correct. The fund where this will come from is the Efficiency, Effectiveness, and Economic Reserve Fund.
Is there anybody who could tell me anything about that fund? Has this been clarified with finance and everybody?
Through the chair, yep, this is the correct fund to be using for this project. We had debated using the Economic Development Reserve Fund. That reserve fund comes with a bylaw that's very specific about creating long-term employment, which this does not fit with until we can review the completed business case. At that time, we could reevaluate, but for now, this is the proper source.
Thank you. Any further, Councillor Usher? Any more discussion? Okay, seeing none, could I have a mover? Councillor Squire, moved, seconded by Councillor Usher. We'll call the question.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 3-0 with 1 abstain.
And returning the chair to Councillor Ridley.
Thank you very much. The next item is the 5.3. And Mr. Stanford, did you want to speak about that one briefly?
Thank you, Chair. Same idea here. The province selected London as part of this fund and is offering up 50% of the funding towards a bike share system in London. That is 50% of the funding of capital cost. And the amount that they are assigning to London is $822,000. Now, this particular project has been on our books for a couple of years. It came through the Cycling Master Plan. It is also part of the London Plan. We've looked at it in the past, and it is something there that we've seen growth in these systems in cities quite large, Toronto, Montreal, Hamilton area, and we're seeing now a little more growth in some of the communities that are more in the size range of London. So part of our work here, and once again agreed to by the province, is the first thing we're going to do here is complete our business case on this particular project. And one of the key aspects of this is that many of the systems in place right now are based under what we're calling first generation technology. And this is where you go to a lot of cities like Toronto and you see docking stations. And those docking stations would have anywhere between 2 and 8 bikes parked there. The next generation of bike share systems actually is moving to more of what's referred to as dockless stations, because the technology resides right in the bike itself. You actually pay through the bike and of course through your mobile app, as well as you locate that bike where it is parked in the city, and it comes with special locking devices. So this is where we want to review during our business case what would be the right type of technology to put in place here in London. So we laid that out and the province completely agreed with our philosophy. And we will come back to you later this year with a particular business case, as well as the results of our community engagement program. We really want to make sure that we're putting in place a system here that is serving as a first phase really the downtown area and a nice large concentric ring of about 2 kilometers outside, capturing the university, capturing Fanshawe downtown, the campus, and as well as what we believe to be about 40,000 residents in the downtown area and about 35,000 people employed. So we've hit what would be one of the larger market areas of London to put this project in place, subject to the business case having results that are acceptable to committee and council.
Thank you. Are there any questions from committee? Councillor Usher.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Stanford, what do you mean by 35,000 employees? Whose employees? All over? And can they be the same as some of them are counted in the 40,000 residents also?
Through the chair, I would imagine that is the case, yes.
But they're not city hall employees though, because we don't have that many.
That's correct. Are there any other comments? Can I get a mover? Moved by Park, seconded by Squire, but there are more comments. So I'll go to Park first and then to Helmer.
Thank you. I think that this is a really exciting initiative. Would these dollars be coming from the EEE reserve also?
Through the chair, no. In this case, when we passed the Cycling Master Plan a couple years ago, Council actually set up a capital project fund for 10 years using federal gas tax funding to fund projects of this kind. And this type of project was one that was actually identified as having potential to be charged against that particular fund. And at this point in time, we have $750,000 already set aside on an annual basis for this project. On the source of financing, it identifies $72,500 that would be from unspent federal gas tax dollars that could be applied to this project as well, bringing that total to 822.
Thank you. That's very helpful. And again, very excited by the prospect of this happening in London. I know there's lots of advocates that have been calling for this, not only on the Cycling Advisory Committee, but people just on 2 wheels. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Helmer.
Yeah, I wonder if Mr. Stanford, through the chair, could clarify. You said in or near downtown, then you said 2 kilometers. I'm just wondering if you could give me the sense of the geography again.
Through the chair, when we initially put our application in, we were looking at a system that was primarily on a docking base at that point in time. And by that I mean places where you'd have stations where bikes would be parked and they would go to and from a dock. At that point in time, we were looking at area in the downtown core and out about a concentric ring of about 2 kilometers. As we began to move through the project here, it became apparent that we could possibly, under a next-generation system where bikes are not tied to the docking stations, that we'd be able to look at a bit of a larger ring as well. And so that'll be part of our business case that we come forward here, indicating how far can we go with the new generation of technology, something that we actually are not that familiar with right now, well, at this point in time, but we will be over the next couple of months.
Okay, thank you. And I know in the past, there have been some private sector organizations that are interested in bike share. And I would encourage you to try and reach out to them to see. I think it's never really made sense for them to do it entirely on their own, but they might be interested in partnering. And hopefully you'll incorporate that into the business case if there is. Happy to talk to you about specific people who've come to me in the past looking to do this kind of project.
Thank you, Councillor Helmer. Any other comments? Okay, it's been moved and seconded, so we'll open that vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 4-0.
Thank you. Any additional business? Go to Councillor Usher first.
I'll yield to Councillor Helmer first. I have a comment I'd like to make after.
Wonderful. Councillor Helmer.
Thank you. I'm hoping that committee will consider passing a motion asking our staff to come forward with an update about the transportation master plan. We've had the master plan underway for a couple of years now, and lots of projects have happened through the transportation master plan. Lots of other projects are planned. But even today, we dealt with a whole bunch of projects that frankly are coming out of the transportation master plan. And I think that we need to go over sort of what is in it and what we've been doing and what's sort of in the pipeline so people can understand the transportation master plan. It's been since 2013 it was approved. And I don't think it's urgent. I think we just need to get it on the work plan to have an update. I also don't think it needs to be a huge undertaking, like just getting an update on what's happened and what's going to be happening. And I hope that someone on the committee would support that kind of request.
Yeah, I'd be happy to make that motion. So long as it's not anything that they have to rush into, I think it's about time that we know where we stand. So I'd be happy to make that motion.
Okay, as a mover and Councillor Usher and seconder and Councillor Park, Ms. Sher, did you want to make any comment on it?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Certainly, we would have no concerns about bringing a report back in a fairly short order. It's actually a fairly straightforward undertaking. We'd be pleased to report on the progress on the master plan.
Okay, that will be up in just a moment to vote on. There it is.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 4-0.
Thank you. Additional business, Councillor Usher.
So, Madam Chair, generally I would make this comment at City Council, but since we don't have a City Council meeting this week, I would like to make it now. There are two things I'd like to advise the committee and council of, is that this Wednesday, March the 21st, is the United Nations Day for the Elimination of Racial Discrimination. An organization called CMARD, which we belong to. If you want the meaning of the acronym, I would tell you, but have asked us to put on red lights in the building to celebrate or commemorate that day. They're asking all municipalities to do that. So I talked to the mayor about that, and I believe that the mayor has spoken to the appropriate people to have that done. So I just want to remind you that it's United Nations Day for the Elimination of Racial Discrimination. And I sent you some information from CMARD in this regard. If you want to use any of that information, please feel free to do so. Secondly, on the same day, March the 21st, and this is something that's dear to my heart, is Down Syndrome Day. And I bring this up because my granddaughter has Down syndrome, and I support Down syndrome quite a bit. I watch her grow from birth to her high school. She's graduating from, not graduating, but she's finishing high school now. And I'm always amazed at these folks. So just wanted to remind you that if you meet anybody with Down syndrome, just say hi to them and treat them with love, because they know how to treat you with love. Thank you very much.
Is there any other additional business? I'm going to look for a motion to adjourn. Moved by Square, seconded by Park. All in favor? Any opposed? Oh, let me count. No. Have a nice day. Bye, everyone.